But yeah, the purpose of this event really is to broaden out ISPA's events program from beyond our traditional policy focus to look a bit more at the markets, services, technology that surrounds all of that, and hear from interesting speakers from vendors, suppliers, analysts, and so forth. So this is the second year of the event, and given the changing nature of events this year, we've shifted from physical to a webinar, and we have 3 webinars taking place over the course of the next 3 weeks. That starts today with a sort of consumer focused session. Next week we have a session on networks, and then the third looks at cyber security. And yeah, today we have 3 presentations. First from Point Topic, which ISPA colleagues will be chipping into, around our 25th anniversary report that we launched yesterday, another activity around that. Secondly, we'll be hearing from Ofcom, who are going to present some stats on what they've seen during particularly the lockdown and COVID sort of period. They've got some data to share there. And then third and finally, we'll hear from NetGem and Origin Broadband about how Origin launched their TV service with NetGem, again, during the sort of COVID period, and how they went about that and what lessons they have to share with the rest of you guys. Just a final point for me around housekeeping. So we are recording this and we'll make it available to people. If we could ask you to go on mute when you're not speaking, that would be fantastic. We are looking for questions, so please do put your hand up along the way. Otherwise, we will open up for questions at the end of each presentation. But with no further ado, I will hand over to Oliver just to kick things off around our anniversary. And just to say that, yeah, ISPA's 25 this year, so it's our silver anniversary. To mark that effect, Council decided to commission some research and to look at some events for this year to mark the occasion. Little did we know that COVID would hit and it would bring home, perhaps more than anything we could do, the value of the internet and broadband and ISPs to the economy and society. And as Andrew said in the AGM earlier on, we're particularly pleased with and proud of the role members have played in keeping us all connected at the moment. But yeah, with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Oliver to kick things off.
It's, yeah, so 25 years of ISPA and 25 years of progress in the UK. And ISPA was founded, and perhaps the most interesting or the most opposite was the original code of practice. And Andrew, I think you have some background on this.
Yes, I'm actually going to hand over to someone who was around back then and still involved in ISPA as our Secretary General, Nick Landsman, who can probably tell a few more interesting sort of stories around how ISPA came to be and what the original focus was.
And I won't speak long, and because Oliver's got all this fully covered. But just one anecdote, I think it's quite interesting. Just after this ISPA code of practice, because ISPA in those days was very much ahead of the game, and in fact our ISPA code of practice that you can read in front of you now, a part of it, was actually copied around the world. Certainly the Irish ISPA in America and elsewhere saw this as an excellent way where the law could not keep up, that the actual internet service providers in the UK and elsewhere adapted and came up with codes of practice that self-regulated. One of the things that happened straight after this was about this time 25 years ago is that I received on behalf of ISPA, indeed on behalf of the whole of the UK's internet industry, a letter from, which was known as the French letter from Inspector Stephen French, telling the ISPs that if we didn't remove 150 newsgroup pages from our service, then certainly there would be consequences, certainly there'd be prosecutions. And there was rumour at the time that an ISP would be raided and would be prosecuted. There is prosecuted. And indeed, a few weeks later, in August 1996, one of the ISPA council members and friend and someone who's involved in ISPA right from the beginning, Clive Feather, representing Demon Internet, was on the front page of the Observer newspaper with the accusation that for £13, ISPs were allowing people to view child abuse material. So it was a very, very interesting, but also sensitive time, and a time when I think ISPA started to show the importance of an industry common voice. So I'll hand back to Oliver and thank him for the presentation. Thank you. Well,
no, that is real insight, and in fact, that is the core of what ISPA is and has been, and of its success, is its leading elements and the fact that the UK has always been a long way ahead in digital terms, but also the framework that is put together that helps to make everyone, helps get everyone to work together and understand each other. I think for me, certainly, that's been core to ISPA. And in fact, you're quite right, Audrey. It's time to move on to the next slide. This is just a cut and paste from the report. You can see higher resolution images should you wish, but this gives you a good idea of how far we've come. You know, back from 1995, when it was virtually, you know, you counted your speed in kilobits per second if you were lucky, and 300 baud modems were still around. And today we can see the spread of ultra fast and super fast and hundreds, if not thousands worth of megabits. And this is going on. You know, this is from June, this map, and it's already out of date. You can go and see that FTTP and the DOCSIS coverage, as well as GFast to an extent, have all contributed to making the UK relatively much faster, relatively more quickly. And I think that's going to accelerate, and that's partly what we're going to see. But if we move on to the next slide. And this is, as I was saying, this is part of what ISPA's been doing. Some of the recent work, Andrew, is perhaps more interesting than the history.
Yeah, and so I think it's also really interesting from the report and the research and taking a look back is how similar today's priorities are to priorities from the early days. So just to take 4 sort of big priorities for ISPA in its current days. So for example, who should be responsible for bad things that happen online? Nick alluded to some of that earlier on with the letter from the police to take action to remove, in that instance, you know, illegal child abuse images from the internet. But yet still we see pressures from policymakers and others to fix the bad things that happen online. And I think the one interesting change we've had since the early days is policymakers are now focusing their efforts on the right part of the internet ecosystem. So where once upon a time ISPs were in the crosshairs of policymakers to do things, now it seems to be more aimed at, and is more aimed at, online platforms. So that the next iteration of an online harms sort of strategy or work stream, the legislation we're expecting perhaps early next year, is going to be more focused at a social media platform than an ISP, thanks to the work of ISPA members and ISPA in making the case for what a proportionate and sensible framework looks like. Equally, one of our big priorities today is making it easier to roll out networks. And again, that's been seen since the 1990s, but probably before that, reducing administration and bureaucracy to make it quicker and easier and faster to roll out networks will remain a priority, I'm sure, for the next 25 years. Another one is adapting to the disruptive effects of the internet. So I think early on, a lot of ISPA's activity was fighting, for want of a better term, rights holders and the music industry and the film industry, trying to convince them to update their business practices, to move to digital, whilst at the same time talking to policymakers about why this isn't an issue you can fix with legislation, it's a market issue. And I think we've moved through that quite a bit, but there's still some industries left that haven't quite been disrupted in the same way that are yet to come. And you know, you can include politics in that, which is now being disrupted by the online world, but also the world of work. So COVID is going to bring on some big changes, and I think how offices exist and how we go about our everyday lives from a work perspective, there's still more to come on that. And then I think the fourth one I picked up is just promoting competition through regulatory intervention. So again, thanks to the good work of members in building and connecting, we have a very vibrant market of 600 ISPs, maybe 100-200 infrastructure operators as well. And that's thanks to the efforts, but also regulatory steps to open up competition from LLU in the 2000s through to some of the work that Ofcom's looking at now around wholesale pricing incentives for fibre. So I think the interesting takeaway from this is 25 years feels like a long time, particularly for this kind of industry. but it feels like a lot of the priorities and the trends and the themes will remain the same for the next the next period too.
And it's today and the future that we turn to next, as it were. It is valuable to learn from the past, and it gives us all a great foundation. But Audrey, the internet comes of age. Now, I've written this and or read this every year since 1995, I think. But this time I really mean it. And I think from what Andrew was saying earlier, you know, even in the industry, there is now this belief, I'm sure there was before, but the internet and being online is a necessity. It really is. There is a stubborn offline population, and it's still around 10, 12%, according to some of the more recent surveys, that still don't regard the internet or being online as for them. And while you have to respect their decisions, you also have to understand that that all our lives are now interconnected and intertwined with the internet. And the impact you see, and whether you regard them as positive or negative, you're able to read about politics across the world, and you're able to view all the goings on that perhaps weren't accessible before. To an extent, you're able to interfere with them as well. You know, Russia's internet is an interesting beast in itself, and very high adoption levels there and quite low prices. Take from that what you will. But I think that it really is now time to look to the future a bit. Thank you, Audrey. No, you're absolutely on message. And it is difficult, actually. You know, we're as analysts, we keep our forecast right. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But I'm going to borrow somebody else's just to close off this little presentation. And this is a guy called Jakob Nielsen, and probably you're all aware of Nielsen's law of internet bandwidth. But essentially, this has held pretty much true as far as a leading edge user demands since the 80s. And you can see some of his, on this slide, you can see some of the blue dots, which are Jakob's own demands at a particular point in time. And if you extrapolate this line forward, and you know, I've sat in a few meetings and had people gulp slightly when you do start talking about, you know, there's going to be demand for 10 gigs in the 20s from, and people are already starting to gear up to sell this as a consumer proposition. But how far does that take us? Well, you get into sort of exabits worth of, which is I think 10 to the 19 if I remember my maths properly, whereas, you know, obviously a meg is 10 to the 6. So there's a lot of capacity still to build into the networks. But if the evidence of the last 6 months has shown us anything, is that the industry in the UK is superbly prepared to try and meet that demand. And I think a significant part of that is due to us. So that's really me. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. So just to conclude on this, really, I've just posted in the chat a link through to the report and other content. So we've commissioned a series of videos, interviews with some of the early movers and shakers within the industry in ISPA, including the likes of Peter Dorr, who helped set up Internet Watch Foundation, and many other things. In addition to that, we're going to publish some more data later in the year, so please do look out for that. And our crowning event for anniversary plans is to get together face-to-face over a drink in an anniversary style reception event. That's not going to happen this year. It probably won't happen for the first few months of next year. I think we are determined to do something similar next year when we get the chance. So please do look out for that, because we are looking forward to getting everyone together in a room and having a discussion and a chat over a beer and a glass of wine, which I think we'll all be looking forward to doing next year. So please do click through, please do read the report. If you have any thoughts or questions, or you want to contribute to our activities around that this year, just get in contact with the team. Thank you. there any questions around that before we move on to our next presentation? In which case, I will hand over to Stephen and Nicholas from Ofcom, who have kindly agreed to come down and provide an update on what we've been seeing from Ofcom around bandwidth and performance this year, which has been a very important topic, of course. Stephen came down last year and did a presentation around the same theme, but clearly it wasn't COVID related, and the world was a very different place. So interested to see what the conclusions are so far. And so over to you, Stephen and Nick.
Thanks for having us again. It's a pleasure to be here with you virtually. I'm very looking forward to taking you through some of the findings from our some of our recent research reports. Actually, it's from more than one of them. But I'll introduce you to myself, and you will hear from Nick very shortly as well. We're here from Ofcom's Market Intelligence team, and we'll take you through the findings from some of our recent research reports. These are looking at some of the changing consumer behaviour as a result of the measures taken in the UK to react to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll also talk about the impact that these have had on fixed network performance. These data are from our Online Nation report, which was published earlier this year, which looks at how people are using the internet and their critical understanding of what they're consuming on it. Our Media Nations report, which looks at the audiovisual industry and how people are watching and listening to this content. And also our Home Broadband Performance report, which looks at how consumers are served by fixed broadband providers. And there's also some insight from our ongoing monitoring and research into consumers' use of communication services, which we've been looking at since March and publishing on our website. There is lots more detail in these reports, and they're all on the Ofcom website. So a little bit of background as to where we are. I'm sure that you're all aware that towards the end of March, we were encouraged to stay at home before we entered lockdown. And home working, where possible, became the norm, and there were many schools and many businesses closed. This led to a significant shift in the way that people were using comm services, and that's what I'll take you through in the first half of this presentation. And those changes had an impact on network performance, and that's what Nick will take you through in the second half. So first off, as you might expect, the amount of time that people spent online increased during the lockdown period. UK adults spent an average of 4 hours each day on websites or apps across their smartphones, laptops and desktops. For the 18-24s, this was particularly high. It got as high as 5 hours per day in April and in June. And for this age group, as well as the under 34s, the amount of time spent online is still higher than it was pre-lockdown. For those aged 35 plus, the time spent online has dropped back to the levels seen before then. We also looked into the detail of the different sites and apps that people were using online and how this changed. For the types of sites that already had a large amount of users, they didn't see an increase in users overall, but they did see an increase in the time spent on them. Social media is a particularly good example of this, and that was a key driver of the additional time spent online. Retail sites also had a greater amount of time, as did news sites. For BBC News site, the average time per user increased by half an hour per day in March 2020. But other sites which were slightly less visited, such as NHS sites, the government websites, and some education sites, they all saw increases in reach and increased numbers of users as people were looking for information about the pandemic, as well as homeschooling becoming the norm. And the amount of time that people spent with video changed as well. We've been seeing for the past few years that the amount of time that people spend watching video overall, so that includes live TV, watching online video, using games console on the main set, watching DVDs, all the things that are outlined on this slide here. That overall video time has been increasing just a little bit year on year, with declines in live TV being offset by increases in particularly SVOD, but also other online video. Lockdown changed this quite significantly. When people were stuck at home, the time they spent watching video each day grew by a lot, an hour and a half extra per day, with time spent with all forms of video increasing as people are searching for entertainment while they're stuck indoors. And for the first time in quite some time, the amount of time that people spent with live broadcast TV increased, adding an extra 24 minutes on average per person per day with this. But even with that extra time, the proportion of video time people spent with live TV fell to less than half, with people viewing more SVOD and more online video to take a greater share of the proportion of viewing. So while the lockdown marked a ramping up of both TV and SVOD viewing, we're already seeing a bit of a return to the pre-lockdown habits in viewing. Live TV viewing levels are falling back to where they were, particularly for the younger demographics, but viewing of SVOD has remained high. So those trends of a shift to IP delivered video that we've been seeing in previous years has only been accelerated in the past few months. The way that people communicated with each other also shifted online in this time. And again, use of video was more predominant as well. This chart shows the proportion of people that used video calling for personal use at least weekly in February 2020 and in May 2020, with the February in the purple there and May in the green. We'd already been seeing a shift to online communication services instead of traditional comm services more generally, but people turned to these in far greater numbers to keep in touch with friends and family during the lockdown period. Before May 2020, half of people were using online voice calls on an at least weekly basis, and a third were using online video calls at the same frequency. But in lockdown, almost 3/4 of people were doing at least one of those, well, we're doing both of those on an at least weekly basis. And looking across the services here, you can see the use of some of the most common, in February that is, the most common services for online video calling doubled between February and May, with WhatsApp being used for video calling by half of people. It's no surprise that the services that were already used more got used more, so WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. But what is also probably a bit more interesting are the newer services that people used for the first time in March 2020. So this asked a slightly different question to the one that we had on the previous slide. So people were asked whether the services that they were using, whether it was the first time that they'd used it since March 2020 or whether they'd used it before. And we know from other data that the number of people who've been using Zoom grew from around 700,000 in February to 13 million in April 2020. And for the users in our survey, 80% of those using it had used it for the first time since March. House Party also had a similar, it had an increase in the number of first-time users, and Microsoft Teams, which is a newer product from Microsoft, seen a number of enhancements in recent weeks, probably as a result of the increased users. That also had a high proportion of first-time users. So now I'm going to hand over to Nick, who will tell you how some of these changes affected network performance.
Hi everyone. So yeah, I'm going to talk you through some of the impacts that changes in usage during lockdown had on network performance. This is using data taken from our home broadband performance reports. In these particular charts, we look at the performance during the month of March, with lockdown having started on the 23rd of March, the dotted line there. And what the chart here shows is changes in performance compared to the first of the month. So anything below 0% is a degradation in performance, and anything above is an improvement. So as COVID-19 lockdown started, there were concerns about the ability of the UK's broadband infrastructure to cope with changes in network load as people work from home and the schools closed. And what we can see here is that the average download speed across all of the broadband providers shown in this chart declined by 2% in the last week of the month. That's the 23rd to the 29th of March, compared to those in the first week, which is the 2nd to the 8th of March. Now, if we look at the figures here, we can see that there were marked differences in the effect that lockdown had on performance across broadband providers, and with Virgin Media's average download speeds dropping by almost 10% compared to the 1st of March at one point during the month. Although the higher speed delivers by its services typically mean that it's unlikely that many users would be impacted or their user experience would be degraded because of this. Conversely, if we look at the tail end of the chart, we can see that actually EE's download speed showed some increase towards the end of the month compared to the beginning. And earlier in the month, KCOM experienced some issues compared to the 1st of March, with the largest decline in average downloads being on the 10th of March. Which coincided with the release of an update to the Call of Duty Modern Warfare game, which required a download of between 50 and 80 gigabytes. At the same time, as we can see, at that point in time, a couple of other ISPs, I think Vodafone and Sky, also experienced issues with download speed on that day. Moving on now to look at upload speeds. Similar to download speeds, upload speeds across the broadband providers included in the analysis fell slightly over the course of March, although the decline was less noticeable. On average, upload speeds in the last week of the month were 1% lower than those in the first week of the month, and differences in performance between providers were also less marked than for download speeds, with only E and Virgin Media's average upload speeds falling by more than 2% compared to the 1st of March 2020 at any point during the second half of the month. Again, it's worth noting that probably the changes in performance here, the slight degradation will be imperceptible to most broadband users. Now we have a similar chart which looks at a degradation in latency as the month progressed. Obviously, lower latency is better, so increases here represent a degradation in performance. And in line with what we would expect to see, given the greater pressure that broadband networks were under following the introduction of lockdown measures in the last half of the month, there was a degradation, as I said, of 2%. This chart shows download speeds from Netflix's servers, and as we can see, they sort of jump about through the month, and it's not clear what's causing these. It isn't that at a weekend or at a certain time of the week that they're busier and therefore performance falls, and there isn't a clear correlation with the launch of any content on Netflix having an impact on the performance as sort of large numbers of their customers seek to look at. But what we can see is the dotted line here represents the 23rd of March, which was a point at which Netflix reduced the bit rates for its download speeds in order to for its streams in order to try to reduce the pressure on broadband networks. And we can see that from the 23rd, there was an increase, or at least a slowdown in the decline at which download speed from Netflix servers were declining. This chart is slightly different than the previous ones. This is a comparison of the performance in the first week of March 2020 and the last week, but this shows just those 2 weeks, and it shows them through the day. And what we can see is that Netflix download speeds were an average of 4% lower between midnight and 6 p.m. in the final week of the month than they were in week 1, and they were actually 1% higher between 6 p.m. and 12 a.m. Now this pattern can be explained by 2 factors. First of all, as I mentioned, Netflix reduced the video streaming bit rates from the 23rd of March to help cope with the increased network demand. But then the second one is the closure of schools. Now, the network streaming bit rate reduction had an effect of reducing the volume of data used by Netflix streaming. During the evening, which is typically the peak time for Netflix use, download speeds improved because any increase in use due to COVID-19 lockdown was only partially offset by the impact of the bit rate reduction. On the other hand, the closure of schools meant that the increase in use between week 1 and week 4 was much greater during the daytime than the evening, and the daytime performance declined because the impact of the bitrate reduction on download speeds was not sufficient to offset the effects of this increase during the period. So in summary, our analysis shows that while there was some degradation in broadband performance in the second half of March 2020, the observed differences tended to be limited, and it is unlikely that they would be perceptible to most users. This is likely to be because broadband providers such as yourselves scale their networks so that they can handle the capacity requirements at peak times. And while COVID-19 lockdown resulted in significant growth in daytime data consumption, the usage during the day was still below the level of pre-lockdown evening and peak weekend demand. So, has anybody got any questions?
Cool, thank you for that. I have a question to kick things off. This is probably a slightly unfair question that we're still through the middle of this, but what's the lasting legacy, do you think, of COVID on performance and expectation around your ISP? I appreciate, again, we're not through this by any stretch of the imagination, but from what we've seen so far, what initial conclusions would you draw?
I think COVID-19 has accelerated trends that we'd already seen in consumer use of online services. And I expect that there won't be a return to pre-COVID levels because people are going to be used to using these services, they're confident of using them, and they know what the benefits are. I do think one big benefit for ISPs is that I think COVID-19 has made people realise exactly how important broadband services are to them. And I think that there's going to be increased appetite for higher speed services, in particular full fibre services when they launch. And I would imagine that consumers will be more likely to be prepared to pay more for those services when they have them. I don't know if you've got anything on there.
One of the things that we look at in the Online Nation report is the proportion of people who aren't getting online, which is around 13% in the last data that we have. And I'd say, echoing some of the things that Nick said, that it may be that that figure gets a bit lower as a result of that when people realise what they've been missing out on in that period.
Well, thank you. Questions?
Hi, it's Guy from BT. If I can just to follow on from that, and I suspect it's too early in the process for you to answer this question. In answer to Andrew's questions, you said you suspect two things that jumped out at me. One, that you expect people to, one, potentially pay more for services, and two, that take up of higher speed services, such as full fibre, could increase. As and when there's any actual real evidence of that coming through, it would be really useful to see that, and I've no doubt you will publish it as and when it is. But is there any? I presume there isn't any evidence of that at the moment because it's too early in the process. But presumably, if and when that does flow through, that will come through in the normal publications, will it?
Yeah, it will do. Yes, I mean we don't have any evidence of it so far, just because there have been a lot of new installations during.
So I suspected, yeah, and I'm not disputing any of your comments. I'm just really keen to see any evidence that you see of that as and when it appears. That's all.
Yeah, no, and I mean also, you know, our normal data collections have been delayed somewhat due to difficulties in getting the data, but you know we fully expect to see, as in the recent Connected Nations update, which showed 14% of UK premises have access to full fibre. We expect that as availability increases, that consumers, some of whom have struggled with other broadband technologies, will be quicker to upgrade and migrate over to full fibre when it becomes available to them.
Cheers.
Another quick question, if I may. So the data that you show is largely from the larger consumer ISPs, as it always has been. One of the themes of this series of events that we put on is the changing nature of the market that you know just as well as us. I'm wondering if there's any work in the background happening to look at how more data can be received from wider industry, for want of a better term, and whether there's much work underway on that you could perhaps highlight.
In terms of the providers that are included in the home broadband performance research, our current methodology is based on recruiting a panel of volunteers who connect a hardware measurement unit to their broadband router. The reality is that the larger the number of people there are on a package, the easier it is to recruit sufficient panelists to include them in the report. And that's per package, not per ISP. The difficulty comes where we have, some of the smaller to medium-sized ISPs, some of whom it's very difficult to get sufficient panelists just because they don't have that many customers, and also, sometimes people are quite wary of joining a piece of research like this and connecting a piece of hardware to their home broadband router. But I mean, we do work with ISPs. In the next report we're planning, which will cover November, we're planning on including 2 new ISPs, but there is a limitation in what we can do with our current methodology because of the recruitment.
Cool, thank you. Interesting to see how that develops over the coming years. Are there any more questions from people before we?
Can I come in, Andrew, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, thanks, gents. It was an interesting presentation. I mean, my sense is that after the first few weeks where there was the inevitable sort of challenge here and there on things, the sort of things have pretty much settled down since then. And dare I say it, touching wood very firmly, that the story of broadband networks since then has been pretty boringly dull and uneventful, obviously in a very good way. I don't know if you've sort of continued to get updated data, if you'd agree with that, or if you've noted anything sort of more recently, looking beyond the end of the period covered by your slides.
We don't have the data, I'm afraid. Sort of towards the end of next month, we're planning on publishing some data from May, but we haven't finished compiling that. And other than that, the March data that I've just shown you is the most recent data that we've got. And we don't have sort of an ongoing stream of the information. We just have access to certain months. Oh,
okay. But I guess the absence of and sort of news items to the contrary suggests that things have been sort of, as I say, pretty solid performance-wise across the industry. So over the last 6 months.
No, absolutely, I'd agree with that.
Which is good to hear. Any final questions before we move on to our final speaker? In which case, thanks both for presenting again. Look forward to seeing more research coming out of you guys from this year and next. And then that moves on really to our last speaker, or speakers I should say, from our partner, our valued partner NetGem, who've been working with an ISPA member, Origin Broadband, to roll out and launch a TV package during, again, the COVID period. So it'd be really interesting to hear from you both how you went about doing this and what other members could learn. So I will pass over to you to present. So if you wanted to share your screen, I think now's the time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. Let me just share my screen. You'll be very happy to know that today I'm not going to talk to you about NetGem TV, but about Origin TV. I don't know, can you see my screen okay? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just going to, I'd like to thank Luke Rogan, the head of procurement at Origin, to come and present this with me. It's fantastic to be able to show this new framework that we have built for Origin, which we believe is very suitable for the altnet ISPs to bundle TV. It's an evolution from where we're coming from at NetGem TV. Much like myself today, it is lightly branded but powered by NetGem TV. And we're going to very quickly walk you through our first learnings and the approach here that led us to this fantastic launch that we did with the guys at Origin over the summer. We'll start quickly with the business objectives, the product and model, and then I will hand over to Luc to give us the view of the go-to-market, because as we know, you can have the best possible product or service. It's all about the execution in distribution, the sales, because it doesn't matter to win. We all love to win awards, but it's about reaching the numbers and the subscriber numbers. That's always been our credo. So, there is one slide about NetGem TV actually. I won't go in detail for that. The only thing that has changed since last time is there is more content. We started investing in content in the summer of last year with Premier Sport, La Liga TV, and buying a few channels. And now we've completed our lineup with, on the left-hand side, the vast amount of inclusive content, which now includes all the household name channels that you expect in a pay TV bundle, even in a light pay TV bundle, channels like Discovery, History, MTV, Comedy Central, via a distribution partnership with TV Player, allowing us to be now not just competitive versus the light entry-level packages from TalkTalk and those players who are playing at the value end, but competing seriously with the entry-level packages from the likes of BT, Sky, and the more full pay TV players. So we presented last year, I think it was, at this business conference actually to you guys, and Oliver, the CEO of Origin, was there, and the objective that Oliver was trying to reach, and that Origin, much like many of the growing ISPs that we partner with, are looking to get, is first of all the net adds, the subscriber base, not just the houses passed, but the houses connected to the broadband and fiber to the home services. And here, basically, that's the data from our partners Point Topic. I mean, it's clear that, yes, there is a 25% of the country which is on premium pay TV, spending £40 upwards, usually with sports, which are going to be very sticky, very, very attached to their service. But then you have just under 50% of households which are Freeview, and that doesn't mean that they are laggards. It can be Freeview plus streaming services in many cases. And then you have a third of households who are on basic pay TV packages. They are the ones that I can think about the recent survey from Zen, people who are, wondering a little bit why they're paying 25 to 30 pounds per month when in fact they're watching mainly the Freeview channels. So first segment being the Freeview upgraders, second segment being the light pay TV, not downgraders, but who are basically questioning the value they're getting, and then the premium pay TV. So there are chunks of the market to address here, just in the spirit of maximizing the broadband net adds, not the TV, the broadband net adds. Then there is the ARPU, of course, the ARPU coming from the add-on price of TV, but also the ARPU coming from, and that's the table here that I'm showing, from the improvement in tariff mix. Usually our partners, the fiber players, have 3 tariffs. Some of them have 11 or 12 and have narrowed down to let's say between 3 and 4. And of course, when people are getting are coming from a bad ADSL type of connectivity, they are so happy to get 50 meg, 100 meg, then it's quite hard to convince them to go for 200, 1 gig speed. And what we're seeing is that, of course, improvement in mix with TV have a direct impact on the overall PNL with a total ARPU boost across the base, not just on the TV, easily reaching 2 or 3 pounds, which do make a difference on the year-long PNL. And then the third reason is tenure and customer lifetime value. Having TV and multiple services, it's obvious, makes people stay longer and probably attract the pure switchers less, which means that better tenure and better return on your marketing investment. So you don't spend 50, 60, 70 pounds of marketing acquisition cost to see your customers leave after 12 months to switch to another competitive offer. So it improves the paybacks overall. So those are the three main reasons, and clearly those 3 main reasons resonated a lot with Origin Broadband's very high ambitions in growth, which they are delivering against. And what we showed last time was this table. Some of you were there when I presented that, which was on the left-hand side, TV as a service. If you want to do TV as an ISP, there are two ways to do it. TV as a service, which is a white label TV service, a bit like what we did with EE or with Jeep Telecom in Gibraltar, which is you have a hefty setup cost, a project team needs to be assembled, you need to buy some content, do some content deals, so there are some minimum guarantees to pay. It does take 9 to 12 months to go to market. This is good performance with NetGem. No, it could easily take 2 years, and then when the project is ready, the TV service is obsolete, and then it never launches. There are a few examples. And then the branding, of course, is the operator branding, and there is usually a few FTEs to employ, even to bring in, even in the case of a managed service, to manage the product. And what we came to see you guys last year to say is NetGem TV is here. Very little setup cost, no content MGs, time to market virtually instant, and everything is handled by NetGem. So we spoke with Oliver from Origin last year, and this quote, as long as everything is exactly the way I want it, I'm super flexible, made me think of Oliver. And it also allows me to use the Minions character, which is a fourth reason to do TV, and it is to use content marketing. You have all noticed that Sky Broadband is using the Minions characters every time they talk about broadband, even if they don't speak about TV. It's an extreme example because, of course, Sky is known for TV anyway, but content marketing allows dry broadband messages to be constantly refreshed, and that's also one of the key benefits. But back to the business model. So Oliver said to me, I like this little pound sign. I don't want to spend setup. I like that I don't pay content. I like the time to market. I like that you handle everything. I don't really like your NetGem TV brand though, so I'm going to put my brand on it. So this is the pick and choose element. And we thought about it, of course, we considered for a couple of months, and we said, okay, let's go for it because for two reasons. And it's not because we were desperate for distribution. We wanted the distribution for Origin, but we thought that there was a good reason to do it, and it was purely and simply because it would sell better. It would sell better because of the clarity of the proposition. Some of our ISP partners don't have a very well-known brand, which means that in the sales conversation, it's complicated to add another not very well-known brand, which was NetGem TV. So clarity of the proposition, clarity of training. And then another element, which is a bit psychological, which is the reason also why I'm wearing this today. I was trying to rock the hoodie and shirt look like Oliver. And it's something we see at all the ISPs in general, but even more so for the altnet, is that the employees and the sales guys live and breathe the brand. I can't remember the last time I spoke to John Irvine and he was not wearing his white fiber polo shirt. He's not here today, I think I can say that. And so on and so forth. And that means that having a TV service that has your brand on it just means that your sales guys are behind it and it sells better. And so all the benefits I mentioned before are reached. So we said, okay, let's go for it. And we work a little bit to create this product framework. And after a couple of months, 3 months, this is the result. I'll just go into, I don't know if the sound will work, but that doesn't really matter. This is on the Origin website. Yes, starting. I don't know if you can hear the sound, but it doesn't matter. It's just music. Luke will be disappointed because he participated in making sure that the tempo of the music was well in sync with the appearance of the logo at the end. So this is the NetGem TV generic video that you may have seen last year, sorry, which shows basically how we help guide through the choice of streaming content that there is available, which is at the heart of it, and then the My Origin branded UI being shown at the end, and this last bit has been done by the agency at Origin. Powered by NetGem TV is not a vanity thing. It allows us to make sure that our content licensing agreements are in the right place. So this is a sneak preview, and those are just a few illustrations. I won't go too much on this. I mean, it is the simple things like doing a simple sleeve that can be added on the box when the customer receives it. A branded quick start guide, branded UI, and that's it. You've got the flavor of the ISP. Exactly like you may completely think that I am an Origin employee when I wear this. Finally, the last bit, which we are putting in place now with Origin, We just won an award for that, Best Interactive Technology at the CSI Awards. It is about the way that we can communicate, we engage with the customers better. People, the guys from Ofcom were talking before about the changes during COVID period. We've seen it. People now spend more than 5 hours a day in front of their TV. TV is a window to the household for ISPs. It's not to be abused. People don't like to receive notifications 3 times a day, but from time to time, it allows you to target your customers and to send a message. It doesn't have to be salesy. It can be about upselling to faster speeds, yes, but it can also be, leveraging this and that event, wishing them a happy new year, or measuring a service, like we are illustrating on the bottom side, which is a cool way to measure NPS on the TV service as opposed to by email. Okay, that's it. I mean, there is more detail. I'm not going to go into this, but we've built basically a framework across product, operation, customer service, the business processes, the analytics suite, the customer, the content marketing, and the sales support, which go with this branded framework designed for the mid-sized ISPs growing, and which I am very, of course, happy. And I'm talking with a lot of you guys separately to walk you through what it could mean and what it could look like with your service and with your brand. I will now hand over to Luc to maybe comment a little bit on the first learnings. The guys at Origin are very good at selling and they are very methodical. So maybe Luc, I can let you share some of your wisdom.
Yeah, I don't know about wisdom, Shan, with me, but handing it over. I think the ultimate key thing, and we were very tentative, obviously, with COVID coming in during ultimately the product development stage for us. There was a tentative, how do we roll this out across Origin's product family and ultimately Origin's customer base family, and how do we engage our agents and ultimately embed this and make sure this product flourishes. And I think the big thing is that COVID had both a positive and negative effect on the rollout of the product, which hasn't impacted us. We're doing quite well today on the product. I think the positives behind COVID and the product is we timed quite nicely our initial release, what we class as a soft launch or trial period of the product, with NetGem TV, correct me if I'm wrong here, Shan, having more football than Sky. You can see it's very much football orientated. So that worked quite nicely in our favour. I think was it 200 games within a 45
in July we had the La Liga and Serie A were starting, and there was like lots of games over a couple of weeks. Yes.
Yeah. So COVID benefited us in that scenario. I think where over this rollout and the initial finding period where it was a little more trickier, and obviously the learnings we're developing and working very well with NetGem at the minute, is that agent feeling of the product in a normal circumstance. We'd bring in the NetGem team, we'd bring in the product, it'd be all around the office. You couldn't walk for Origin TV powered by NetGem. With a work from home environment, we had to approach things in a slightly different fashion. We initially moved to what we class as a group of super users. So we rolled the NetGem TV product out to them, and they had that product and watched the evolution of product development from NetGem TV all the way through to Origin TV powered by NetGem, and ultimately fed that back. And then we did a similar sort of approach with the above the line sales, ultimately opening it up to a narrow channel, which was very controlled, so we could measure how attachments going over that period, how what the CPA impacted is versus our spend, and how that impacts attachment, so we could take learnings and understand what ultimately we needed for distribution, so we didn't overstock our warehouse. And then what we did with that is, as soon as we understood where we were going and what the attachment rate looked like and what the volumes looked like, we expanded that across all of our above the line channels. And then most recently, what we're looking to do, or what we've started doing this week, is proactively contacting our customer base, doing a full product launch, a specific unique offer for our customers, ultimately going, this is Origin TV, this is what we provide, timing it very nicely with, as Shan said earlier, the release of TV Player on NetGem TV. So we've got enhanced content for what we're describing our enhanced solution, a 4K box, premium channels, premium sports for an affordable price. And that's very much driving in line with what we want our brand philosophy to be and the strategic direction. And the only shout out I'll give at this point to NetGem is the addition of the mobile app to their solution. So it wasn't initially in scope, but it was something we were very passionate about, giving the user the power of TV in their hand and continuing that unified brand experience. And it was very quick for Shannon and his team to turn that around. And it's, you know, a very key feature of our proposition and what we try and sell and what we focus our sales pitch around, in fact. I know we've run over slightly, so I'll wrap it up there unless anything else you want to add there, Shan?
Oh, thanks for mentioning the mobile app, Luke. It's true that we, as part of the deal with TV Player, all the premium channels are available live and on demand on the mobile app, which is a nice out-of-home story, but also goes very well with the main reason to go for a very fast speed on broadband, which is multiple streaming in high definition in the home. Thanks, Luke, for that. We can take any question. Any questions? If you would like an Origin broadband hoodie, don't hesitate to ask Luke. It takes usually 6 months, but you will get it eventually.
That's a sly dig from Shan there.
Well, thanks for the presentation. Really interesting to see the how it goes, Luke, and yeah, what success sort of comes from this, because yeah, it's really interesting to see. If there are no questions, I mean, I'm sure we'll be featuring NetGem and Shan and similar presentations in the months and ahead. So this won't be the last of, I'm sure, NetGem's presentations to members. So we're definitely going to keep that dialogue going, because it's yeah, really interesting innovation.
Thanks, Andrew.
But if there are no sort of further questions or comments, I suggest we probably wrap it up now, as we're a bit over, so apologies for that. Just a reminder that this is the first of 3 of these sessions. So next week at 2 o'clock, we have, I think, 5 speakers, all focused around the theme of networks. A really interesting mix of speakers there. And the week after, we have the 3rd and final session looking at cybersecurity and the opportunity for members to monetize that and to make more of the opportunity there. So lots to come on this. And so yeah, thank you for attending, particularly those that attended the AGM earlier on. We were just about quorate, which is what we needed. So unless there's any further comments, I suggest we wrap it up now, and thanks again.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Andrew.
Cheers. Bye all.
Cheers, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.